Write something here. I was 27 when I signed the lease for the townhouse on Beacon Hill. It was old, historic, and way underpriced for the Boston area, practically a steal. Nestled on a cobbled street shaded by maple trees, the building looked like a photograph from another century. I remember standing in front of the place, clutching the keys in one hand, wondering how I'd gotten so lucky. I was about to learn that not all luck is good luck. The landlord, a thin, pale man with eyes that didn't blink enough, seemed all too eager to hand over the keys. He barely looked me in the eye. "Everything works," he said. "You'll find it, quiet." That first week was uneventful, if a little eerie. The house had character by that, I mean it creaked and sighed like it had lungs. The wooden floors popped at night, and the pipes moaned low in the walls. I chalked it up to age. What I didn't understand then was that the house was watching me. Measuring me. Deciding. It started with the bedroom door. I'd close it at night, only to find it slightly ajar in the morning. Not wide open. Just enough to make me question my memory. Then came the whispering soft, unintelligible murmurs around 3:12 a.m., the same time every night. I'd wake up with my heart pounding, drenched in sweat, straining to hear words that never made sense. One night, as I worked late in the study, a tall back chair by the window turned on its own. I froze, watching it pivot ever so slightly. I convinced myself I must have bumped it earlier and forgotten. But when it happened again, this time scraping against the floor, I knew better. Still, I stayed. Because that's what we do. We rationalize. We tell ourselves stories to quiet the dread building in our chest. "It's just the wind," I told myself. "Old house quirks." But deep down, I was lying to survive. Things escalated quickly. Lights flickered. Shadows stretched too far. I began locking my door every night, even pushing furniture in front of it. But at exactly 3:12 a.m., I'd still hear it, knock, a long pause, then knock knock. It was never frantic. Just deliberate. Confident. I decided to investigate the basement. It had a door I hadn't noticed before, small, maybe 4 feet tall, and bolted shut with rusted iron latches. The moment I opened it, the temperature dropped. My breath fogged. I descended slowly, each step groaning beneath me. The basement was a graveyard of forgotten things: dusty chairs, shattered mirrors, old boxes. In the far corner was the door. Smaller than the first. Unmarked. I touched the handle, and something thudded from behind it. Not a creak. A thud. I ran. That night, I didn't sleep. The knocks returned, louder now. The handle to my bedroom door twisted once. Twice. I held my breath, clutching a lamp like a weapon. But nothing came through. The next day, I installed a security camera in the living room, hoping to catch some proof that I wasn't losing my mind. That night, I checked into a cheap motel across town. I needed sleep. Sanity. But sleep never came. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected, living room. I opened the app. The feed was grainy. The living room sat in silence. Then, a figure stepped into view. Not walked. Just, appeared. A tall, shadowed shape. It stood at the foot of the stairs, head tilted toward the camera. The screen glitched. The figure was closer. Another glitch. Closer. I threw the phone across the room. Then came the knock. Not from the app. From the motel door. I crept to the peephole. Nothing. But the handle moved. Slowly. Deliberately. I bolted out the bathroom window and didn't stop running until my lungs burned. I never went back to that house. Didn't pack. Didn't explain. But sometimes, I still hear its soft murmurs just as I'm about to fall asleep. I've changed cities, numbers, even names. But the house? It knew me. And I think it still does. I thought leaving the house would bring peace, but fear is not something you can outrun. It's not tied to walls or old staircases, it ties itself to the mind. A week after the motel, I moved to a new apartment. Clean, modern, sterile in a comforting way. But the first night there, I woke up gasping at 3:12 a.m. No knock. No whisper. Just the memory of both. And then I saw the notification light blinking on my phone. Motion detected, living room. The app still worked. I hadn't disconnected the camera. Stupidly, maybe bravely, I opened the feed. The room was empty. No movement. No figure. But on the wall opposite the camera, written in soot, were the words, "You left me." I dropped the phone. There was no power running to the townhouse anymore. I'd had it shut off. And yet, the camera worked. I contacted the company, asked them to disable the device, erase all footage. The tech support woman sounded confused. "Sir, the device was deactivated last week. It hasn't uploaded any data since." But I saw it. I know I did. I began to feel watched in my new place. That sixth sense we all try to ignore started sharpening. I'd find my closet door open. My toothbrush moved. My bed felt cold on one side, as if someone had been lying next to me. I began dreaming of the door in the basement. In the dreams, it's always slightly open, and something is behind it. Watching. Waiting. And the dreams always end the same way, with the whisper, "You brought me with you." I tried everything. I burned sage, left bowls of salt at the corners of every room, even had a local spiritual advisor come in and bless the space. She was quiet, solemn. After she left, she texted me only one sentence, "It does not belong to that place." I stopped sleeping. The hours between midnight and dawn became unbearable. Shadows didn't just stretch, they leaned in. My reflection in the bathroom mirror would sometimes smile when I didn't. There were days I felt myself unraveling. One morning, I found muddy footprints leading from my front door to the bedroom. Just one set. Bare feet. Too long, too thin. I scrubbed them away, hands trembling. When I looked again, they were back. I went to a therapist. Explained everything well, almost everything. I avoided words like haunted or entity. Instead, I described it as a recurring trauma, a fear I couldn't shake. She said it sounded like PTSD. But I knew better. This wasn't something that happened to me. This was something still happening. One night, I opened the app again. Not out of curiosity, out of desperation. I needed to know if it was still watching. The screen loaded. The camera feed showed an empty living room. But this time, there was sound. Faint. Breathing. Slow. Measured. I turned the volume up. And then, just as I leaned in, the voice whispered, "Come home." I closed the app, deleted it. But the words stayed in my head, repeating over and over. Come home. What do you do when the only way to end something is to return to where it started? I didn't want to go back. But I couldn't live like this anymore. So I packed a bag, just the essentials, and drove to Beacon Hill. It was early evening when I arrived. The house looked exactly the same, though the surrounding homes had changed. New cars. Different flowers in the garden next door. But my house? Untouched. As though it had waited. I hesitated before unlocking the door. My hand trembled as the key slipped into place. The air inside was still. Not stale. Not musty. Just, paused. I stepped over the threshold and the door closed behind me without a sound. I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I whispered into the silence. I'm here. The house replied with a familiar creak overhead. Something was awake. And it had been waiting. I took slow steps down the hallway, past the dusty portraits and stiff-backed furniture. My footsteps didn't echo, they vanished. Swallowed. Each room looked exactly as I left it, right down to the half-burnt candle on the mantel and the crooked picture above the stairwell. But there was a smell I hadn't noticed before. Not rot. Not mold. It was metallic, sharp. Like the scent of blood on cold steel. I didn't go upstairs. Not yet. I went to the basement door instead. It was already open. That was my first real mistake. I stepped closer, trying to remember if I had ever left it that way. But that door had always been shut tight. Bolted. Now it yawned into blackness. I stood at the threshold, breathing shallowly. The cold rose to meet me. It wasn't the kind of cold that lived in brick and stone. It was deeper. Older. Alive. I descended slowly. The basement was as I remembered it. The clutter. The broken things. But the door in the corner, the one that had thudded, was open too. The wall behind it had changed. It had markings. Not paint. Not carvings. But something burned into the foundation. Shapes that twisted if I stared too long. Symbols that didn't belong in any language I knew. And in the center, something had been drawn in what looked like ash and bone. A symbol. A circle with jagged, uneven edges. A shape that pulsed faintly when I stepped closer. I knelt. And that's when I heard it again. Whispers. Not from around me. Not behind me. But from inside my head. We know your name. We never forgot. You came back. You came back. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't help. It wasn't sound. It was thought. Foreign, invading, relentless. I stumbled backward. My foot hit something hard. I turned. It was the chair from the study. Down here. And sitting in it. No. Not sitting. It was forming. Taking shape. A shadow thickening in the air, condensing into the outline of a man. No face. No features. Just void. And then, it tilted its head. Just like the figure in the security feed. I bolted. Up the stairs, 2 at a time, lungs burning, heart trying to escape my chest. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it. Silence. Until a single knock echoed from the other side. Then the doorknob turned. And kept turning. Then the doorknob turned. And kept turning. I backed away, step by step, until I reached the edge of the kitchen. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. But the knob mercifully stopped. Silence returned, thick and humming. I stared at the door for what felt like hours. Nothing. Then I realized, it wasn't trying to break through. It was inviting me back in. That's when it hit me. The basement, the markings, the whispers. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a contract. One I never knowingly signed. The moment I crossed the threshold again, I had agreed. Not in words, but in presence. And the thing in the house. It wasn't just feeding on fear. It was growing through it. I took one last look at the hallway, the way the shadows pressed against the wallpaper like fingerprints. I'm done, I said aloud, not to the house, but to myself. Then I did the only thing that ever worked, I turned my back to it. I walked out the front door. This time, it didn't slam. It didn't resist. It let me go. But as I stepped into the night, I knew better. You don't escape places like this. Not really. You just leave them behind long enough to forget the shape of their voice. I moved again. Changed everything again. but some nights, especially the ones where the air feels just a bit too still, I wake up at 3:12 a.m. And I swear, I hear the doorknob turning. The day I signed the lease for the penthouse, I thought I had made it. 30 stories above the noise and chaos of the city, I stood surrounded by polished marble, glass walls, and my own overinflated sense of success. The apartment had everything: an open plan layout with sweeping views of the skyline, whisper quiet HVAC, designer appliances. It even had a name, the 30th. I had just been promoted to regional director at the firm. The kind of promotion that came with not just a corner office, but the respect I'd been chasing for the better part of a decade. That night, I popped a bottle of overpriced champagne and toasted to myself in silence. The city lights blinked in approval below me. I felt untouchable. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just the absence of noise, but the oppressive kind of stillness that pressed against your skin. I assumed it was just the insulation. Maybe the high elevation. It wasn't until the third night that the silence started to feel deliberate, predatory. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, no sounds to pin it on. Just an overwhelming sense that something had heard me wake up. Something was listening. On the fifth night, the knocking began. 3 faint knocks. Always 3. Always at 3:12 a.m. I checked the hallway. Nothing. The security cameras showed nothing. But I started to dread that time, counting down to it each night. Then came the reflections. It started subtly, glimpses in the glass wall that didn't match my movement. Shadows flickering where there shouldn't have been any. I'd catch a glimpse of myself walking by, only to see a second silhouette behind me. One night, I paused in front of the full-length mirror near the elevator. My reflection stared back, normal at first, then it smiled. But I hadn't. I told myself it was stress. Maybe lack of sleep. I tried to laugh it off. But even my laugh felt hollow inside those walls. I started keeping the lights on. Every room. Every bulb. I told myself it was to make the space feel alive. But the truth was, I wanted to chase the shadows into corners where I could watch them. Even then, the shadows crept in. The power went out on the 11th night. No warning. Just darkness. Silence thick enough to choke on. I lay in bed, holding my breath. Then I heard it. Breathing. Right next to me. I turned on my phone flashlight and scanned the room. And there it stood, a tall, thin figure at the foot of my bed. Its outline flickered like a glitch in reality. It didn't move. Just stared. Then it tilted its head. I passed out before I could scream. When I came to, the apartment was filled with light. My bedroom window was wide open, cold wind curling the edges of the sheets around my legs. I stumbled into the hallway and saw it, the mirror. Cracked. And something had written on it. "You brought this." The letters were uneven. Shaky. But unmistakable. I didn't pack. I didn't even put on shoes. I took the stairs, all 30 flights, my feet numb, lungs burning. At the bottom, the doorman looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Sir," he asked, "are you all right?" I didn't answer. I kept walking. I called out of work. I checked into the nearest hotel. I told myself this was temporary. But that night, at 3:12 a.m., I heard it again. 3 knocks. On the window. I was on the 5th floor. No balcony. When I pulled back the curtains, I saw the reflection of my old penthouse. And in it, the figure. Still. Watching. I collapsed. I cried. But I never went back. I tried to burn the bridge. I cut ties with the real estate agent. Closed my bank account. Cancelled my phone. Moved cities. Changed my name. None of it mattered. I live in a one-bedroom apartment now. No glass walls. No skyline view. Just concrete, brick, and a single deadbolt I check 10 times a night. But some things don't stay behind. Some things travel light. Some nights, I wake up exactly at 3:12 a.m. Not because of the sound. Because of the absence of it. Like the world around me is holding its breath. And sometimes, God help me, I hear it. Knocking. Once. Then twice. Then a pause. And sometimes, in the dark, I hear it whisper, "Still with you." I finally did some digging. I don't know what I hope to find. Peace, maybe. Closure. Answers. The building had a history. Of course it did. 2 years before I moved in, a man who lived in that same unit had jumped from the balcony. Left no note. No explanation. The staff said he was a quiet man. Always kept to himself. But before he died, he had told one of the cleaners that he had to go before it started knocking again. I don't know why I didn't learn that before I signed the lease. Maybe I didn't want to know. I tracked down his brother. He didn't want to talk at first. But after I told him where I lived, where I had lived, his voice cracked. He said it followed him home, the man said. That it knew his name. That it waited for the silence. I asked him what it was. He whispered, "The 31st floor." "There is no 31st floor," I replied. He said nothing. But when I got off the call, I checked my old elevator photos. Floor buttons ran from B2 to 30. But in every photo, the light over the button labeled 31 was faintly glowing. I kept going back to the photos. To that barely there glow over a button that shouldn't exist. I zoomed in, adjusted contrast, sharpened shadows, but no matter what, there it was, 31. Not engraved. Not labeled. Just a faint circle of light, like an invitation only visible to those already marked. I couldn't ignore it. I returned to the building 3 weeks later. Just once, I told myself. Just to see. To confirm I hadn't lost my mind. The receptionist didn't recognize me, and I didn't give my name. I rode the elevator alone, pressing the button for the 30th floor. The lights flicked slightly as the car ascended. I stared at the control panel. Nothing strange. Nothing added. But just as we passed the 25th floor, the light above the non-existent 31 button blinked. And then it clicked. Not loudly. A soft sound, like a mechanical sigh. And suddenly, we weren't moving anymore. The display read, 31. There was no ding. No door opening. Just the hum of stillness. And then, the lights went out. For a second, maybe two, it was pitch black. When they flicked back on, the doors were open. Before me stretched a hallway I'd never seen. The carpet was the same as the rest of the building, but the walls were darker stained. The lights overhead pulsed faintly, like they were alive. And at the end of the corridor, a single door. My old apartment number, 3001. But with one difference. Underneath, carved into the wood in deep, rough gouges, was one word. Return. I didn't step out. I couldn't. I pressed the door close button until my thumb throbbed. It didn't work. Then came the sound. The breathing. It wasn't behind me. It wasn't in the hallway. It was in the walls, as if the floor itself exhaled in long, hollow gasps. The elevator doors slowly creaked closed. I descended in silence, hands shaking, staring straight ahead. When the doors opened to the lobby, I walked out without a word and didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away. I stopped trying to live a normal life. I couldn't concentrate. Couldn't work. Couldn't sleep. Every night I stayed awake, afraid of what dreams might show me. Or worse, what wouldn't be a dream. I began hearing the knocks even during the day. In the bathroom. On mirrors. Inside drawers. Sometimes I would hear my name whispered from inside my own closet. I bought cameras. Motion detectors. Alarm systems. None of them caught anything. But every morning, they were tripped. Every single morning. My apartment began to change. The walls warped subtly, as if breathing. The mirrors fogged without heat. Once, I found a faint handprint in the condensation. But it wasn't human-sized. It was elongated, like someone had dragged a broken finger across the surface. I hit rock bottom when I found myself standing on the edge of my fire escape, looking down. And for a moment, I understood the man who jumped. Not because I wanted to die. Because I wanted it to stop. I made a choice. If it was going to follow me forever, I would face it on my own terms. I returned to the tower not to run, but to climb. This time, I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs. All 30 floors. I wanted to hear each step. To feel the strain. When I reached the 30th floor, the hallway looked unchanged. My apartment door was gone. In its place, a blackened, scorched wall. I turned to go back, but the stairwell was gone. Just a smooth wall. No seams. No handle. No escape. And then I heard it again. The knocking. 3 times. From behind the blackened wall. It didn't wait for me to answer. The wall split open down the center, revealing darkness beyond. Thick, oozing black, like ink suspended in air. I stepped in. Not because I was brave. Because I was tired. The space beyond wasn't a room. It wasn't even real, in the way floors and ceilings should be. It was a corridor made of memory. My childhood bedroom. My old dorm room. Every hallway I had ever run down in fear, all bleeding together like oil on water. The figure waited in the middle. Same height. Same stillness. But now I could see its face. It was mine. Or, almost mine. A distorted version, like someone had tried to paint me from memory and got the eyes wrong. The smile too wide. The skin too smooth. It spoke without sound. You left me. I didn't know, I whispered. You always knew. It stepped forward. I stepped back. The space behind me dissolved. I was trapped in the echo of my own choices. Take it back, it said. Take me back. I closed my eyes. And I screamed. I woke in a hospital bed. A maintenance worker had found me unconscious in the stairwell between the 29th and 30th floors. No one knew how I got there. No signs of trauma. No drugs. Just a man who had collapsed with a scream caught in his throat. They held me for observation. I told them I didn't remember. And I almost believed it. Almost. Because now, every reflection smiles before I do. And every mirror shows a hallway behind me that doesn't exist. And sometimes, when I stand in elevators no matter the building I see a faint light blink over a button that isn't there. When I accepted the temporary contract, I didn't ask many questions. It was meant to be a short-term research project, 3 months in a rural district, cataloging land and water samples for an environmental impact study. The company rented a small farmhouse for me. Out of town, cheap, quiet. Perfect for focus, they said. It sat on a stretch of land that seemed untouched by time. Miles from the nearest neighbor, framed by skeletal trees and a field of dry grass that whispered even when there was no wind. The house itself leaned, just slightly, as though it was tired of standing. Inside, it was cold. The air smelled of old wood and forgotten things. The furniture was covered in dust sheets, the windows warped, the wallpaper yellowed with age. Still, I told myself it was just a building, 4 walls and a roof. I unpacked. I settled in. And I didn't notice, at first, how the house seemed to breathe. The first few days passed uneventfully. Work was tiring, the isolation strange but welcome. I read, worked, slept. But on the 4th night, I woke up to a sound. Tap. 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 I checked the front door. Nothing. The kitchen? Empty. The wind? Still. It came again the next night. 2:13 a.m. Every time. Always 3 soft knocks. Not at the door but from inside the walls. On the 6th night, I felt it. A drop in temperature. Not just a chill, but a sudden absence of warmth. I could see my breath hanging in the air. The taps turned to slow, deliberate footsteps in the attic. I hadn't been up there. Not yet. A week in, I found the basement. It was hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the hallway. The latch was rusted shut, but I pried it open. Stairs descended into darkness. The air that rushed out was wet, heavy. I brought a flashlight. The basement wasn't large, but it was cluttered: boxes, furniture, mirrors covered in old sheets. One mirror stood uncovered. It was tall and thin, propped against the stone wall. And as I moved past it, I saw something in the reflection. A hand. Not mine. It reached from the edge of the mirror and then vanished. I ran back upstairs. Slammed the trapdoor. Moved furniture over it. But I kept hearing the scratching. From below. I stopped sleeping. I stopped working. I paced. The footsteps came every night. The mirror, God, the mirror. It started showing things I didn't remember. Me walking into rooms I hadn't entered. Me standing in the hallway when I was in bed. And once, me sleeping with something crouched at the foot of my bed. I called the company. No answer. I checked online, no listings for the farmhouse. No map pins. It was like the house didn't exist. That night, I heard my name whispered from the heating vent. Twice. I drove into town the next day. Found the only diner still open. The waitress was kind. Middle-aged. Sharp eyes. "You're in the Hollis place," she said flatly. I paused. People don't stay there. Not for long. An older man in a corner booth grunted. "Takes 'em." "What takes them?" I asked. He didn't look at me when he said, "The house. Doesn't like to be left." They wouldn't say more. But when I left, the waitress handed me a folded piece of paper. On it, "Don't look in the mirrors." I went back. I should have left then, but I needed answers. I couldn't run from something I didn't understand. I uncovered the basement door and descended again. The mirror was cracked now. Words scratched into the glass. "Stay." The air was frigid. My flashlight flickered. And then I heard it scratching in the vent. "Close. Too close." A whisper against my ear. "I see you." I screamed. Ran. The basement door slammed behind me. Back in the bedroom, the mirror shattered on its own. No wind. No motion. Just a sudden explosion of glass. I saw myself in 100 shards, and in each, a shadow behind me. The windows burst open. Cold wind poured in. I saw my breath cloud and freeze in midair. The voice returned. "You let me in." I grabbed my keys and fled. I didn't pack. I didn't lock the door. I drove until the sun rose and my tank neared empty. I didn't stop shaking. I pulled into a rest stop and sat. Hours passed. I watched people come and go. None of them looked at me. As if they couldn't see me. When I checked the rear-view mirror, I saw something in the back seat. A blur. Then nothing. I moved. Twice. New job. New state. But some things follow. I still wake at 2:13 a.m. I still hear footsteps. Sometimes the mirrors fog, even when it's not cold. And sometimes, I see a room behind me that isn't mine. I don't own any mirrors now. Not really. But reflections find you. Some houses don't want to be left behind. And some don't let go. Whatever was in that house, it found something in me. Maybe it finds something in all of us, if we're alone long enough. I tell myself it's over. But deep down, I know the truth. It's waiting. Every night. At 2:13. It started with the television. I didn't watch it much, but I left it on for background noise. One night, long after I'd fled the farmhouse and moved into my apartment, I woke up to static. No image, just the gray snow of interference. My hand trembled as I reached for the remote, but before I could switch it off, the static cleared just for a moment. And there it was. The farmhouse hallway. My reflection walking through it, even though I wasn't there. I yanked the cord from the wall. The screen stayed on. Only when I whispered, "I'm not there anymore," did it fade. In a box I hadn't opened since the move, I found a cassette tape. Unlabeled. I didn't own a cassette player, but something about it unnerved me. I took it to a thrift store across town. The man at the counter didn't ask questions. Just popped it into a dusty stereo behind the desk. At first, static. Then breathing. Slow. Ragged. Then a voice. "We remember you." He hit eject. His hands were shaking. "I think you should leave," he said. I left. But I took the tape with me. That night, it was in my bedroom, though I'd left it in the car. I started dreaming of the house again. Only in these dreams, I never arrived. I was always trying to leave. And something always followed. The hallway stretched longer every night. The windows disappeared. The air grew thinner. I woke up once with dirt on my hands. And my feet. As if I'd been walking barefoot in a field. The next morning, footprints muddy and long led from my bed to the front door. But the door was locked. Bolted. Chained. And behind it, faint knocking. Against every rational instinct, I went back. The house stood just as I had left it, but aged. Decayed. The door fell open when I touched it. Inside, everything was covered in frost. The wallpaper curled, the air sharp with rot. And on the floor, etched into the wood in the same handwriting I'd seen in the mirror. "We never left." I didn't stay long. Just enough to confirm what I feared. The house hadn't been empty. It had just been waiting. A letter arrived a week later. Handwritten. No return address. It read. "The house was never about the place. It's about the remembering." Inside was a photograph. Black and white. Of a child standing in the field behind the farmhouse. It was me. But I'd never been there before the contract. At least I didn't think I had. Memories began surfacing. A hallway. A whisper. The smell of damp earth. Was the house calling me back? Or had I always belonged to it?